That afternoon, the skies over Kravuma were overcast, with a light wind sweeping across the dry mid-slope grasses. An off-season rain had just passed a few hours earlier, leaving streaks of wet mud along the hillside. The Mabeka Basin, the largest wetland within a 10-kilometer radius, gleamed under the sun, coated in a thin layer of water. A large herd of buffalo, more than 30 strong, was making its way around the edge of the basin toward the western grasslands. Among them were a few calves, trotting close to their mothers. The ground beneath them was soft with mud, but showed no warning signs, until the lead buffalo suddenly let out a sharp bellow, threw its head left, and stumbled backward in panic. The first sound was a low, muffled thud, like a soft ball falling onto a damp floor. Then the ground beneath the herd began to give way. There was no warning, no cracks, no tremors, just mud collapsing, as if a giant mouth had opened below. In seconds, 6 buffalo near the center of the sinkhole were swallowed up nearly to their bellies. The rest of the herd panicked, spinning around in chaos, trampling one another as they fled. Muddy water splashed into the air. One calf, the smallest of the group, was separated from its mother and slipped directly into the depression. The mud had already risen to its chest. It flailed instinctively, its cries silent as its throat clenched shut. Its eyes darted around, searching for its mother, for the herd, but they had already vanished behind the tall grass. From the southern watchtower, Ranger Tao froze as he looked through his binoculars. In the middle of the swamp, he spotted a still, dark shape, a tiny figure, left behind and struggling. His heart sank. He grabbed the radio. "Soroka Station to main base. We've got a buffalo calf trapped at Mabeka, likely abandoned by the herd, requesting permission to intervene." The reply was cold. "Mabeka zone is unstable. Intervention is not authorized." Tao clenched his fist. He turned back to the binoculars. The calf was still alive, and in that moment it looked directly at him. Tao had been a ranger for over 30 years. He'd witnessed life and death countless times, but never before had he seen the eyes of a wild animal look so human. No panic, no rage, just a silent plea, urgent and unwavering. The denial from main base didn't surprise him. In recent years, conservation policy had shifted toward prioritizing human safety and terrain stability. There was no room to risk a life for a single animal, especially when the chance of survival was nearly zero. But Tao didn't look away. Across the basin, the calf kept struggling. The mud crept higher. Its back legs were nearly submerged. He left the tower and walked briskly toward the gear shed. He grabbed a coil of rope, a geological map, rubber boots, and a long, probing rod. His movements were quick, practiced, as if he'd already planned for this. No one stopped him, maybe because no one knew what he was doing. Or maybe they'd seen that same look in his eyes before and knew there was no changing his mind. On the way to the basin, he passed a group of technicians setting up a ground sync monitor. One of them asked casually, "Any news from Mabeka, Tao?" Tao didn't answer. He just raised the coil of rope over his shoulder. His eyes didn't meet theirs. They stayed locked on the basin. A few in the group paused, then bowed their heads. The wind picked up as he reached the edge of the basin. The muddy ground clung thick to the soles of his boots. 40 meters ahead, the calf was still alive. Its head hung low, but its eyes remained wide open. This time, it made no sound, only shallow, uneven breaths. Tao sat down on a stone, resting for a few seconds. An old memory came rushing back, one from long ago. 13 years earlier, a baby elephant had fallen into a shallow pit near the river. Back then, he was young, a by-the-book ranger. He'd called for backup and waited for clearance, but by the time help arrived, the elephant had died from exhaustion. That night, he dreamed it was still alive, standing in the rain, asking, "Why didn't you come back?" Today, He wasn't going to let that happen again. He began probing the ground, step by careful step, making his way toward the depression. Each move softened the mud beneath his feet. In some places, he had to crawl to avoid putting too much weight on one spot. He tossed the rope forward like an anchor. He didn't get too close, just close enough to keep the calf in sight. He knew it was watching him, and for the first time, it stopped struggling. It just breathed, long and deep. Before sunset, he had planted 3 anchor posts and marked the stable boundary of the basin. He pitched a small tent at the edge of the woods, eyes still fixed on the swamp ahead. The calf was still there, and so was he. The next morning in Kravuma was unusually cold and overcast. Thick clouds hung low, heavy like the expressions of the night shift staff at Soroka Station. Tao hadn't returned. No one asked. No one left the geological radar monitors, like the whole station was silently watching something no one dared to name. At the Mabeka swamp, Tao woke inside the makeshift nylon tent. His body was stiff, his shoulder aching from sleeping on his side all night to keep his eyes on the marsh. He hadn't lit a fire, hadn't eaten, just drank a bit of water, stood up, grabbed the rope and soil probe, and went out to check the terrain again. The calf was still alive. It wasn't struggling anymore, but its head still moved, occasionally lifting, then dropping back down. One of its front legs had disappeared beneath the surface. Tao knew if he didn't get it out today, its chances of survival would drop by more than half. He turned on his radio, his message brief. Urgent request, 30-meter pull rope and portable manual winch, southern edge of Mabeka. No need for personnel. Drop the gear and leave. Maybe it was the firmness in his voice, or maybe everyone at the station already understood he would do this, with or without the equipment. 2 hours later, the gear arrived. A small manual winch, the kind used for field engineering surveys, a brand new coil of bright orange rope. The man who brought them was a young technician. When he saw Tao wading into the swamp, covered in mud, eyes bloodshot, he said nothing, just set down the gear and left. Tao set up the rig his own way. No need for a diagram. He propped the winch between 2 thick bamboo poles buried deep into the stable edge he'd mapped the day before. The rope ran in 3 directions, distributing the pull to avoid dislocating the calf's joints. As the sun rose higher, villagers began appearing in the distance. They didn't approach, only stood in small groups on the dry bank. Word had spread the night before, the old man staying with the calf. Some didn't believe it. Others came quietly, carrying bottles of water, bags of rice, and prayer candles. One elderly woman muttered, "That's not a calf. That's a trial from the heavens." Tao tightened each knot, reinforced the anchors, tested the lines from every angle. The mud in Mabeka wasn't like mud elsewhere. It was slick, fine, and had a powerful suction. Pulling from the wrong direction could twist the calf and sink it deeper. Tao lowered the winch by 15 degrees, swapped the crank for a secondary pulley to control the tension phase by phase. The crowd thickened. They didn't speak much. Most crouched, elbows on knees, faces resting in hands. A few built makeshift shelters, laid tarps across the ground. In the dim daylight, it looked like a silent vigil. No one knew exactly what they were hoping for, but no one had the heart to look away. A boy, maybe 10, stepped away from the group. In his hand was an old rope, braided from strips of dried bark. He walked up to Tao and shyly said, "I don't know how to help, but this is the rope I use for my toys. It's really strong." Tao took it without a word. Later, he tied it around his wrist to anchor himself. By noon, the sun grew harsher. The calf had begun to tip sideways, its head slumped, eyes half shut. Tao sat down in the mud. His face was weathered, sun-stained, but his hand never left the rope, as if he were measuring the animal's final breaths. "Hey, kid," he whispered, barely audible. "If you still want to live, I'm not leaving here before you do." Right then, the mud beneath his feet started to bubble. The calf's rear leg twitched, just slightly. People stood. Someone shouted. Tao gripped the rope, He didn't rush. The first pull had to be perfect. One wrong move, and all this effort would vanish into the swamp. He grabbed the crank and began to turn, slowly, deliberately. The rope tightened. The ground trembled, just faintly. Birds scattered from the trees. A young woman cried out, "It's moving!" The mud began to shift, not up, but down, as if the entire swamp understood what was happening. Each turn drove the rope deeper into the earth. The mud resisted, unforgiving. But Tao was patient, every motion, every breath, like he was speaking to the land. His eyes never left the calf. Its head rose slightly, trembling. The first time in 2 days it lifted its head. No one in the crowd sat anymore. They stood, but no one cheered, no one clapped. They just stood, as if even a whisper might make the earth change its mind. Then, a sharp, choking sound. Mud burst from the calf's stomach. Its body lifted, only a few inches, but it was enough to make the whole world hold its breath. Tao dropped the crank and rushed forward, grabbing its head. His hands sank into the freezing mud, fumbling beneath its belly for a hold. He murmured like in prayer, his face caked in mud, heart pounding. An old woman in the crowd began to cry. The young mother clutched her child. The child whispered, "He's really doing it." Evening fell over Mabeka. The sky turned gold, sunlight filtering through layers of cloud, lighting up the calf's eyes, no longer half closed. They were wide open, staring straight at him. One last pull, and the mud let go. A long screech came from the pulley as Tao tightened the crank. The rope vibrated hard. The bamboo posts creaked. The mud beneath the young buffaloes started to peel away in clumps, no longer a vague shifting, but a clear concession from the earth itself. The villagers stood frozen. They had watched for nearly 2 days, but this moment, this tiny movement, made their hearts seize. No one had truly believed it would happen. Tao leaned down, grabbed the strap tied around the buffalo's shoulders, and pulled while working his hands into the mud to peel off the layers of earth clinging to the animal's side and belly. His hands trembled, but his eyes stayed fixed. The mud was icy cold, laced with roots and sharp stones that cut into his wrists. But he didn't make a sound. A strong gust burst from the buffalo's nostrils. It was still alive, and it was starting to push back. Good job," Tao whispered, his voice breaking like the wind. "We're almost there." He returned to the pulley and adjusted the force. One of the bamboo poles snapped, throwing the crank off balance. The crowd gasped. A young man rushed in to hold the side rope. Another stepped up to steady the pulley. No one said a word. No one gave an order. They just stepped forward. One final effort. Everyone held their breath. The entire swamp seemed to stop moving. Beneath the mud, the buffalo's legs began to shake. It tried to brace itself, to lunge forward. That's when Tao shouted for the first time, "Push, kid! Push!" A roar came from the animal's throat, weak but long. Mud burst out on both sides, and then its body popped free from the swamp like a heavy weight lifted on one last breath. The buffalo slid out of the muck and collapsed onto the soft bank. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to jolt everyone present. Some covered their mouths. Some cried quietly. Others embraced each other. Tao staggered over, collapsing to his knees beside the animal. He braced himself with one hand, panting hard, his face caked with mud, unable to speak. His trembling hand reached for the buffalo's neck. Its pulse was faint, but steady. Still there. "It's still alive," he muttered, as if he couldn't believe it himself. The buffalo lay there, breathing hard, mud caked across its back, its legs pulled in tight as if trying to shield itself. Its eyes were wide open, unable to make sense of where it was. The villagers gathered close, but no one dared get too near. An older woman stepped forward, knelt down, pulled a handful of dry leaves from her basket, and gently placed them on the animal's forehead. "So it knows it's welcome," she said. A child stepped out from the circle and slowly approached. He placed his hand on the buffalo, said nothing, and bowed his head. The buffalo didn't flinch, but its eyes blinked softly. Tao sank down, back against a slab of stone. He looked around, his whole body spent, but a faint smile played on his lips. He didn't have the strength to speak loud, but he whispered clearly, "You didn't give up, so neither did I." The villagers brought water, dry grass, a few clean cloths. They began wiping the mud from the animal, one by one. No one hurried. No one commanded. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment a long time, and now that it had come, no one wanted to disturb its sacred silence. Evening fell over the Mabeka swamp. A soft breeze rustled through leaves still caked in mud. The buffalo breathed steadily. Tao still sat there, one hand resting on its forehead, eyes closed but not asleep. He was listening to its breath, guarding its return. Someone brought a bucket of water and slowly poured it around the animal's mouth. A young man gently scooped away some mud near its nose to help it breathe. A girl soaked a cloth in cool water and softly wiped its eyes and forehead. The buffalo didn't move, but its gaze followed every motion. A boy brought a basket of tender grass, the kind used for newborn calves. He sat down, stripped it into smaller pieces, and tucked them into the buffalo's mouth. At first, nothing happened, but on the third try, its jaw shifted. A deep breath came out. Tao opened his eyes. He looked at the buffalo, then at the people around him. He wanted to say something, but his throat caught. In the end, he just placed his hand gently on the animal's head and repeated one single line, "You're home now." The sun began to set. On the ridge of Mabeka, the light turned pale orange. The sky glowed like scorched earth. Clouds floated slowly over the reflecting water, where, for the first time in 3 days, no one was afraid anymore. Night fell. The villagers began heading home, but a small group, including Tao, the child, and the older woman, remained. They lit a small fire. The buffalo lay beside it, eyes half closed, breathing deep and even. The cold wind swept through the forest, carrying the scent of wild grass. A lone bird flew across the dark sky, its call echoing like it was looking for someone. By the firelight, Tao still sat watch over the creature, his hand resting on its chest. At midnight, the buffalo let out one loud breath. Everyone jumped. But then it lay still, ears twitching gently, still breathing, still here. And the sky began to lighten. The first light over Mabeka Marsh was thin as a veil of golden mist. The young buffalo was still there, breathing steadily, eyes now fully open. Its coat had dried, revealing long scrapes along its body. One ear was torn, and its nose bore the crust of an old wound, but its eyes were brighter than the day before. Tao sat nearby, his back against a stone slab, his mud-stained cloak still damp. He had stayed awake all night. But his gaze wasn't tired. It was calm, at peace. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much. He held a small handful of fresh grass, bringing it close to the buffalo's nose. This time, it didn't flinch. For the first time, it stretched its neck, sniffed, then slowly began to chew. Children from the village brought more water, rice cakes, and a large cloth. A young woman washed her hands, then helped Tao gently clean the buffalo's neck, where the ropes had left deep red marks. The buffalo didn't resist. It lay still, breathing deeply, as if it knew now was the time to rest in order to live. The villagers started discussing building a temporary pen near the marsh, but Tao shook his head. We shouldn't keep it here too long. It needs to return to the forest, to its herd. Someone asked, "What if the herd doesn't take it back?" Tao replied, "It's alive. That means nature has chosen it. Some herd will accept it, or it'll create a new one." No one argued with that. They continued to care for the animal, not like a prisoner or a pet, but like a guest returned from the edge of death. By afternoon, when the buffalo could stand on all fours, though still shaky, Tao decided to remove the rope. He stepped back, not signaling, not pushing, just watching. The buffalo stood still for a long while. Wind blew from the distant forest across the marsh. In that moment, it turned to look at him, not with fear, but silently, as deep and quiet as the evening shadows falling over Mabeka. Then it turned away, walked slowly, without looking back, straight toward the forest. It moved slowly, one step at a time, leaving deep tracks in the still damp mud. The first footprints after 3 days that had nearly swallowed it whole. The forest wind blew against its path, but it didn't falter. Each trembling step made the crowd hold its breath. When it was about 100 meters from the trees, a dark figure emerged at the forest edge, an adult female buffalo. No one saw her arrive. She stood there, tall, silent, not advancing, not retreating, just watching. The young buffalo stopped. It didn't call, didn't back away. It stood still, looking straight ahead, then walked again, slowly approaching. When it was just a few paces away, the female turned, and in perfect silence, the two walked side by side into the forest. No sound, no prompting, no confirmation needed. The villagers watched, no one looking away. The woman who had laid leaves on the buffalo's forehead pressed her palms together in front of her chest. The little boy pulled a stalk of grass, still heavy with seed, from his pocket and placed it on the ground like a farewell. Tao said nothing. He just bowed his head. His hand, the one that had held the pulley rope for 3 relentless days, was now clenched around his notebook, as if trying to hold on to something unspeakable. That evening, a fire was lit at the Soroka outpost. People gathered in a circle. Some began retelling the story from the beginning. Each person had their version. But when they reached the moment the buffalo turned to look at Tao, everyone fell silent. Someone called that day, the day the buffalo returned. Tao took out his notebook and wrote a short line. Left, but not alone, chosen and returned. Nature makes no promises, but remembers those who keep theirs. He closed the book, gazing toward the distant forest, where a life had returned, carrying with it a living memory. The moon rose behind the mountains. Its silver light spread across Mabeka like a cool blanket, draping the wet grass and stilled mud. The Soroka station still had a fire burning, but most had gone. Only a few figures remained, quiet, and Tao, sitting alone on the large stone where he'd pitched his tent 3 days earlier. He didn't look at the fire. He looked toward the forest, where no signs remained. But in his mind, the image of the buffalo turning back was carved into the sky. A boy approached and sat beside him, the same boy who had handed him the rope. He was quiet for a long time, then asked, "Uncle Tao, why didn't you give up?" Tao didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands. The scratches had dried, but still stung. A breeze passed, carrying the scent of burnt grass from somewhere in the woods. At last, he said, "Because once in your life, you have to do what's right, even when no one thinks it is." "I saw it go back to the forest," the boy said, a little deflated, like nothing ever happened. Tao smiled. "Because nature doesn't owe us anything. It just gives us a chance to live kindly. And that's enough." Far off in the forest, a buffalo appeared beneath the moonlight, tall, deliberate. It walked ahead. Behind it, a smaller shape followed, leaving a trail of aligned hoofprints through the damp grass. And in that quiet moment, something was restored. Not with noise, not with record, not with reward. Just nature, taking note in its own way. A week after the events at Mabeka Marsh, the Soroka Conservation Station no longer felt quite the same. It wasn't because of changes in staff or new policies, but because something had shifted deep within the people who worked there. They started paying closer attention to small reports, strange signs in the forest. Rescuing a single animal was no longer seen as something that relied entirely on procedure. Something had awakened, a kind of primal instinct that made it impossible for them to ignore what used to be dismissed as too small to act on. The story of Tao spread farther than anyone expected. A photo of him sitting beside the mud-covered buffalo, still holding the rope tied around his own wrist, had become a symbol. A local newspaper called him the last one standing. The phrase soon found its way into classrooms, television segments, and ranger training sessions. A group of young artists came all the way to Mabeka and recreated the entire scene in a massive oil painting. At the center was the buffalo, walking slowly toward the forest, with the thin silhouette of a man behind it, not looking back. They asked Tao if he'd agree to have a bronze statue placed at the marsh's entrance. He chuckled. "If you're building a statue of me, the buffalo has to go in front. I was just following it." On National Biodiversity Conservation Day, Mabeka was chosen as a ceremonial site. Villagers brought wildflowers, paper flags, and bunches of young grass tied with twine. Children painted buffaloes, not as wild animals, but as a friend who had come home. The ceremony unfolded with soft music and quiet laughter. But Tao wasn't among the honored guests. He gave no speech, accepted no gifts. For the entire event, he stood on the edge of the crowd, near a large tree, where he had once hung a water bag on the second day of the rescue. While others offered flowers, raised flags, and posed with paintings, he quietly left the station and headed south, toward the old path that led to the forest's edge. The afternoon was cool, dry grass crackling underfoot. He walked alone, carrying only a notebook and an old canvas hat. When he reached the forest's edge, he stopped. Before him lay a patch of soft earth where grass had not yet grown back, and on it a few faint, deep hoofprints. Fresh. He sat down and placed a hand on the largest print. Among them, buffalo dung still moist, sign it had returned. There was no sound, only wind and a fullness, as if someone had just been there watching him, then quietly stepping away. Tao didn't call out, he simply smiled. That evening, while others shared dinner and stories around the long table, Tao returned to his small room at the station. He opened his notebook to the last page, the one that recorded all the key moments from those 3 days at Mabeka, and wrote a single line. "It's not the strongest who survive, but the ones remembered for never walking away." He closed the notebook and set it on the wooden shelf, beside an old, faded photo of him and a woman now gone. She was the only person who had ever said to him, "There are lives that only survive because someone chooses to stay." The fire outside still burned. Mabeka lay quiet again, just as it had in the beginning. But from now on, every creature that passed through, every footprint left behind, would walk on land that had been reclaimed, with heart. Before going to bed, Tao sat a while by the faded photo. In it, the woman was smiling, gentle, kind. She was the one who had taught him how to read tracks, how to be still in nature, and how to love a creature without expecting anything in return. "You see," he murmured, "Mabeka hasn't swallowed up all our faith just yet." Outside, a soft wind rustled through the spear-leaf trees, whispering like an old lullaby. The night wasn't cold. The full moon lit the marsh. A pair of owls flew by, wings fluttering with the sound of breath. There was a knock at the door. It was a young man, newly assigned to the Soroka station. He bowed slightly, holding a notebook to his chest. "Mr. Tao, I heard the story. I want to learn, not just how to rescue a buffalo, but how not to give up." Tao looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood, took the old notebook from the shelf, the one that had been with him for 30 years, and handed it to the young man. "Read it. But don't copy it. Write your own version. And one day, if you have to stay behind for a life, then stay. Stay fully." The next morning, as the sun rose above Mabeka Marsh, 2 figures could be seen, one old, one young, marking stakes, measuring land near the wet edge. They didn't speak much, but in every movement, every glance, there was something unmistakably shared. The older one was Tao. The younger one, no one knew his name yet. But everyone knew that from that morning on, Mabeka had gained one more person, willing to stay. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much.